Mr. David Lebowski. I can't hear you. Mr. Lebowski, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm in quarantine down in Tumon, and Wi-Fi is limited. Anyways, thank you very much, Senators, for allowing me to give testimony today. My name is David Lebowski. Some of the, just let me be blunt to start off with. The Guam Medical Board and the Guam Allied Board have some similar problems. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners, currently under the leadership of Nathaniel Berg, has been in violation of the law for the last 8 years. The law that you mentioned, Senator, the Patient Protection Through Information Act. It's been 8 years since that law has been on the book, and they haven't done anything with it. There's no reason why it wasn't implemented. They have recently started to make some futile attempts after the lack of compliance was brought up at the arbitration information hearings recently. This law, the Protection Through Information Act, is a consumer law that protects patients on Guam against negligent doctors. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners, in a meeting that I attended last year, stated that they will license anyone who meets minimal qualifications. At that time, I almost went through the roof when I heard this, as my son Asher had just recently passed away due to alleged medical incompetence by someone they licensed. The problem is, the medical board has knowingly licensed people with past histories of malpractice and sexual abuse allegations against them. That's a fact. That's not me making up. It's in the newspaper. There's a whole long list. They licensed these doctors with negative histories, and these doctors came to Guam and injured or sexually abused patients on Guam also. These were known to the board before they got here, but they licensed them. I don't understand that. To make matters worse, the Guam Board of Medical Examiners had 6 complaints in front of them before they decided to do anything with the sexual abuse allegations against a doctor from Guam Behavioral Health. Why not act after the first complaint? Why did it take 6 complaints before they did anything? Dr. Gill, in the past, spoke about peer reviews when the board receives complaints about doctors. She did an interview on KUAM. A peer review is a form of self-regulation by qualified members of a profession within the relevant field. Peer reviews rarely, if ever, I don't think they ever happen at the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, and should happen, as Dr. Gill said. I know for a fact my son Asher, never was afforded a peer review, and that should have definitely happened. It's obvious to us, not only as parents, but people in the community, that the Guam Licensing Board of Medical Examiners is about the protection of themselves at the peril of the community. That's not just my opinion. Many people have that opinion. You would think, with the Arbitration Act protecting doctors, that the Guam Board of Medical Examiners would be on the other side, be more objective and more aggressive in their job to protect us. When they do investigations of complaints, this is really sad. When they do investigations of complaints against doctors, they, by our experience, refuse to meet with the victim's family or victim. Imagine, my 5-year-old son passes away, and they refuse to meet with me, the father who witnessed what happened, who watched my son. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, I just lost it. Okay. Watched my son dying at the clinic, and I had to argue with the doctor to have him examined. I went to the medical examiner's board meeting. I emailed them many times, and I asked them, what was the status of their investigation? and no information was, oh, we don't have a quorum. Oh, sorry, we didn't do anything. Sorry, we'll get back to you. It went on and on. It went on for months and months with no response until the exact same day that the Pacific Daily News released the story of our lawsuit against Seventh-day Adventist Clinic. That day, with no notice to us, with Nathaniel Berg and the board released the results of his investigation to the PDN, not informing us the results first and never once interviewing us. The PDN knew the contents of a letter that was going to be sent to us before we did, and they published and they referred to it in their story. We read about the death of my son and the investigation done by Nathaniel Berg. We were never notified. So when they talk about investigations and doing this and that, this is the real story. It's my opinion that Nathaniel Berg and the board released the letter to protect the doctor at SDA the same day as the PDN article, and it shows a bias in the investigation. The current Guam Board of Medical Examiners, there's serious conflicts of interest. Do you think Asher, my son, or anyone can get a fair investigation of what happened to them at a clinic, or let's say SDA, by Dr. Berg, or any doctor who makes large sums of money from that clinic? Do you think Nathaniel Berg or any doctor would find fault and lose their income? Even if it's not true that he was impartial, the fact of it is the appearance of conflict of interest. For him and the board, it was simple to dismiss us, not talk to us, thinking we would just walk away. And as you know now, we're not walking anywhere. Why didn't Dr. Berg, as he mentioned, recuse himself from the investigation of SDA? He has income from there. Why didn't he recuse himself? Many of the board members have conflicts of interest. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners, in my opinion, needs to be has some real serious ethical issues. It needs to be replaced, that maybe with new members. And there's conflicts of interest, and there's ethical incompetence by actions of the board, especially allowing doctors to come to Guam, knowing that they have histories of malpractice, and hurt us, do the same thing on Guam and hurt us, on sexual abuse allegations in the States, licensing these people. They come to Guam and they sexually abuse people. This is their responsibility. They're supposed to be protecting us. As long as, in my opinion, as long as Nathaniel Berg is on the board, especially as chair, and this board functions to protect doctors by its actions, not by my opinion, as it does now, at the expense of consumers, is my opinion, lives will be lost on Guam, or injuries, or sexual abuse by doctors will continue to happen with no accountability. Hiring anyone from the States who meets only minimal standards should not be the benchmark for bringing doctors to Guam, especially with histories of negligence. Oh yeah, well, we need a psychiatrist. Yeah, so what? He sexually abused somebody. We'll still bring him to Guam. It won't happen here. But it did. Regarding the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, and there's a lot of similar information. Accountability is, as we've discussed many times, accountability has been a common theme on Guam lately in the news, with discussions about the Medical Malpractice Forced Arbitration Act. This is particularly concerning with some of the questionable practice at the Guam Board of Medical Examiners and the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners. In the last public hearing on November 7, 2019, regarding the Forced Arbitration Act, Senator Talahi, she told Dr. Yasuhira that his testimony, I'll never forget this, that his testimony was a breath of fresh air. And when she said that, I thought to myself, yes, it really was. I have to agree with what she said. Rather than focus on the arbitration pros and cons, he discussed the governing boards and the problems with the governing boards. This includes the Guam Board of Medical Examiners and the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, among others, and how they handle complaints by consumers, the public, against professionals, whether it be doctors, physicians, assistants, or others. The need for impartial reviews, which is not happening now, of complaints was stressed by Dr. Yasuhiro and Senator Talahi, which would offset many of the problems that we see with arbitration. Dr. Yasuhiro said that if we have good boards, with impartial, and people feel they're getting a fair shake, a lot of the need for arbitration wouldn't exist. Consumers have a right to have their complaints heard by the Allied Board or the Guam Board of Medical Examiners without bias or apparent bias or prejudice. Board members should never, ever investigate their colleagues. This has also been said by Guam lawyers who defend people in malpractice cases. The colleagues are their friends. They should not be. It's definitely a conflict of interest. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe for me that the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners chair, Ms. Mimi Balahaja, has been on the Allied Board for over 20 years, as possibly maybe 4 other people. This is probably the longest chair or board members of any board on Guam for sure, or maybe anywhere in the country, or anywhere outside of an autocratic country. They're supposed to be reappointed as mandated by law every 3 years. Why hasn't it happened? No Guam board should have the same members that long. It negates new ideas, new members' motivation, etc. It destines the board to the humdrum and apathy and biases to maintain the status quo, not to mention easily leads to corruption. What also worries me is that just recently, the Board of Allied Health Examiners went to the legislature to establish ethics guidelines for the Guam Board's licensed professionals to get them approved in law. This is great. Ethics for professionals who are already practicing is better late than never. But they should have been established years ago. This should have been a top priority for the board, not to mention the board members who have been there for 20 years. What have they been doing? Ethical standards are the top priority for any governing licensing board and for any professional in the country. This is a known fact. How can you protect the community and hold people to professional standards when you never established such standards for 20 years until now? Who is holding the Guam Board of Health Examiners accountable? I'm positive that if you contact some of the boards across the country, all will tell you that they have had established standards in place for years. I also used to be licensed with the Allied Board, so I know about this. This is one reason that board members need to be reappointed every 3 years, to keep people motivated, current in law and actions which are aimed to protect the community and hold members accountable. New members, young members, new blood, new ideas, new graduates, fresh energy, honesty, all needed on any board. With this is the need to establish a real impartial review system, as we discussed, for complaints of professionals at the board license. Yet still, as everything else at the Allied Board, the impartial review system has not been set up. It's at the same place it was 20 years ago when these board members joined the Allied Board. Reviews of citizens' complaints with the Allied Board, if they ever get around to doing them, because there's a bunch of them now that haven't been addressed, are not impartial, quite the opposite. They are biased from our experience. You cannot have a physician assistant reviewing or investigating another physician assistant when they're all buddies on the outside, as an example. And there's many examples of that. This is exactly what Dr. Yasuhiro emphasized in his testimony, and Senator Talahi discussed the need for fair, impartial boards that we do not have. And still today, as we listen to the board members discuss it, I don't hear this push for impartiality. I hear a lot of fluff and going around circles. This isn't 20 years ago and how things were done back then. It's time for these people who are on board for 20 years to either do their job or move on, and let's get some fresh minds. It's time for the Guam Board of Health Examiners to be under that same law as other boards, with members having to be reappointed every 3 years. It's time for Mamie and the others who have been on that board for 20 years to maybe leave. Let some new people come on. Let some other people that can protect us if you cannot do it. 15 months to address my complaint regarding Asher is way too long. It's not expeditious, as they said. it's a shame that it took that long. And it was only done that quickly because I kept saying stuff on the legislative floor, and finally they responded. Okay, I also want to make some comments on the reappointment of Dr. Berg while I'm here online, so I don't have to come back. I personally am against Dr. Berg being reappointed to the Guam Medical Board for the reasons that I have outlined in my testimony. He has shown, in my opinion.
Mr. Lebowski, is this testimony on the confirmation then? We're not.
No, actually, I'm sorry, Senator. I combined it all together because it's all really the Guam Board, a medical examiner, and Dr. Berg is almost the same. So I combined it all, so I won't have to come back and talk another 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm just finishing up now with the reappointment testimony, if I can, on Dr. Berg. Is that okay? Okay.
Yes, if you could please keep it 5 minutes or less, please.
Oh, okay. It's gonna be quickly. Okay, regarding Dr. Berg, I'm against him being reappointed to the Guam Board for the reasons that I've already outlined in my presentation about the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. He has shown, in my opinion, incompetence, bias, has not followed the laws on the book, seemingly putting conflicts of interest before a proper investigation into complaints against doctors. I feel he's put his own interests first over that of the consumers and has severe conflicts and an inability to recuse himself when for sure he should have done in the SDA case, as our example. He is responsible as chair for bringing doctors here to Guam who have injured us, maybe killed us, or sexually abused patients. He knew of the problems, he signed off on the problems, but he ignored them, and these people came to Guam and did the same things here. He has not in any way addressed how to mitigate consumer concerns or provide for an impartial board and peer review. Both are called for. He refuses to recognize that people die of medical negligence on Guam and will not set up a system to offset it or mitigate it or even follow the laws on the book, such as, again, the Patient Protection Through Information Act. One last comment, adding insult to injury. During the hearings that you held, Senator, regarding the Arbitration Act, when Dr. Berg, when the consumers started expressing themselves, myself and the others, parents that were there and family members and so forth, when he started expressing himself, Dr. Berg got up and walked out of the legislation at the info hearings. I couldn't believe it. I was astonished. Imagine the chairperson of the board in charge of protecting Guam's patients and consumers walks out when Guam's patients and consumers are talking about their problems. Didn't care, walked right out the door. What they have to say and express wasn't important enough for him to sit and listen to. Further evidence that he isn't right for the board, in my opinion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lebowski, for your testimony. We will make sure that the latter portion is added to the committee report for the confirmation. Thank you. And so, senators, on the oversight questions, if you have questions for the panel before we move on to the